because you are floating, and I'm about to flush your ass. I'm Liam, he's Rob, and welcome to the Guys Podcast. This week, we are looking back at the time Crash Override, Acid Burn, Phantom Freak, Serial Killer, and Lord Nikon had to stop the plague from unleashing the Da Vinci virus and thus framing them for tipping over some boats. If that all makes sense to you, then you've already seen Ian Softley's wonderfully 90s cyber thriller Hackers, with more pages, needless sunglasses, and rollerblading teens than you could possibly shake a stick at. Hackers feels at once both horrendously silly and oddly charming, one often dragged on by its surprisingly fantastic cast and consistently decent direction. Now, I'm not sure why all my friends watched Hackers when we were growing up, but it was one of those core movies. All my friends had seen Hackers, and I had like a real soft spot for this growing up. I hadn't seen it for ages, but I was genuinely concerned going back and rewatching this that it was going to be a complete train wreck. Turns out, this film's kind of fun. It's still, don't get me wrong, it's silly. It's so aggressively of its time, but I quite enjoyed this film.
You said that then because you saw my face. Just as I took a breath to speak, you went, I need to say yeah, because you think I'm going to just turn around and slag this film off.
Well, honestly, right, if you came back to me and said, I fucking hate this movie, I'm not going to die on the Hackers Hill, I can tell you that much. I might try and talk you round to some of it's quite good, but it's still a fundamentally silly film. It's just a charming one, I think.
I'm going to give you personal growth on my part because I am not just going to, I mean, this film isn't good, but I am not just going to turn around and just hack this film to pieces. Pun intended.
Oh, there we go.
Because you can see the nostalgia, like 2024 now, there is nostalgia within it. But it is, as you said,
part of
it is very silly. I do love the clothes. And to be fair, like they're a choice, let's be fair. The fact that you said it in quotes as well, about them all being teens.
Well, I mean, other than, is it Joey? Joey's an actual teen.
Yeah, he was 16. And he was the one.
You can tell because he looks about 10 years younger than everyone else.
Yeah. And he was the one who they made smoke. Not the other guys, the 16-year-old. Let's make the 16-year-old smoke.
And I love the fact in one of the more 90s moves in this movie, of which there are many, I've listed some of them, the fact that Joey smokes 2 cigarettes at once, I'm just like, man, that's a 90s thing. That's the kind of dumb shit you would do in 1995 when you're a teenager, is just smoke 2 cigarettes at the same time because fuck everything, you know? We were just all a bit more nihilistic, I think, in the 90s.
You said it as well, right? 1995. Lawrence Mason, Nikon, was in this film. 1995. Now, I don't care what you say, I can't find his date of birth online. That motherfucker is 45, while the rest are 23 and all that.
I'm sure my wife looked it up. I think he's 29.
29 in this. Okay, then.
Yeah. Well, he's playing 18, so.
A year before, he was fucking Tintin in The Crow. How did he go from Tintin
to Lord Nikon, whatever the hell his name is? Yeah, it's a strange choice, but this was the era of 30-year-olds playing teenagers, whether it be, 90210. Obviously, you can go back to the extreme examples like Grease and stuff. But, this ran right through until like the mid-2000s. You think of like Spider-Man, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. They were all like 30 years old. If you go back and watch the high school sequences there, it's just full-grown fucking men cutting about. It was even this, I think... what's his face? Andrew Garfield was the best part of 30 when he got the role of Spider-Man, again, supposedly in high school. So it's only recently they've kind of looked at this and gone, this is a bit silly. We should actually get high school kids in. But this movie, if anything, they bring more attention to it by simply having one teenager, i.e. Joey, smoking amongst, a crew of men, basically, and women, obviously. And
Joey's mum looked the same age as the rest of his friends, in commas, which was very funny.
It didn't help, of course, that Johnny Lee Miller, who I actually think is quite good in this film, and he isn't one of the old. I think he was 23 when he did
23, this. Yeah, I think he was 23.
Yeah, but he's one hairy motherfucking 23. He was one of those kids, like, he went to high school, who had pubes when they were like 12, and they would like make sure they got naked in the change rooms because they had these big man dicks coming around. Yeah. I bet you, because he has got, not only has he got a 5 o'clock shadow at all times, but he has like hair coming up, well, not only at the front of his t-shirt, like up his neck, but at the back as well. You can see it. It's like he has got full-on man hair, front and back. The motherfucker was 23. I'm like, God damn, man.
His American accent left something to be desired as well. Like, he was struggling at some point with his American accent. Which is so generalized, it was funny.
which is weird because he was famously fantastic at doing a Scottish accent a year earlier. Well, because he
year
filmed
later, wasn't it?
this. Yeah, he filmed this before Trainspotting, didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh no, I think he filmed Trainspotting before this, but this came out after Trainspotting, or something like that. No. Sorry, he filmed this after Trainspotting, but this came out before Trainspotting. So there we go. So this was his first breakout film, but I think he had already filmed it anyway. They even said like when he went up to Scotland to film Trainspotting, he put on not just a Scottish accent because they would have fallen for that, an Edinburgh Scottish accent specifically, and he stayed in character without telling anyone, not character, but kept the accent on the whole time. And when they said cut on the last shot, he suddenly started speaking in his actual accent, and everyone's like, "What the fuck?" We all thought you were Scottish and you were from Edinburgh, but he just wanted to see how good his accent was. So he does have a history of doing really good accents. This isn't one of them, in fairness. Inconsistent is probably fair enough, rather than it's not terrible, but like you said, it's very just kind of like vaguely American-ish, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to talk about plot-wise in this. You've already said the plot in your intro about the Da Vinci virus and everything like that, looking for the garbage file and oh my god,
it's paper thin.
We have to talk about the hacking scenes, and we got to get into it straight away because those hacking scenes are interesting to say the least. Now, we said it last week, right? You can't really just spend time watching a guy on a clickety clack on a computer. It's not really cinematic, so you've got to give something. But I don't know how many times they went past that garbage file before they got to that garbage file. Like every time I'm watching them go through the Gibson, as it were, was ridiculous.
The kind of secondary MacGuffin, which I know they wanted to force in because Gibson's a reference to the guy, the famous cyberpunk writer, blah, blah, blah. But it actually starts off quite positively because you have the opening sequence when he gets, what the fuck is his name? His name is ridiculous. Is it
Zero Cool?
Yeah, no, his real name is
Dade Murphy. I think that's a great name. I wrote that down. Great hero name. Dade Murphy.
I think Dade has only ever been used once. I think it's in this movie. But anyway, when they go and arrest Dade, I had concerns because the way they kind of slow down time, I was like, the direction was a little bit, 1995, and I wasn't sure. But then when they go to the sequence of him going to New York, which of course they try and sell as the worst thing that's ever happened to a kid, you suddenly get to move to, let's be clear, central New York, another very 90s thing. The fact that supposedly his struggling mum can buy an apartment in central New York.
And sorry, I know you're getting to that, but you've already said because they're moving to New York, and he's just turned 18. It's his 18th birthday. That fucking giraffe neck motherfucker can barely sit straight in that seat. Like me and you are tall men, so we understand the legroom thing.
Yeah.
His head is pretty much hitting the overhead.
Yeah. It really is.
It is ridiculous.
They still make the shot work though, because I mean it helps because like I said, that opening sequence, I had my concerns. But then all of a sudden, Halcyon and On by Orbital starts playing, which is an absolute banger of a track. And that is one of the things that I think works so well for this movie is the soundtrack is so good and so reminiscent of its time. Like I was never like a dance guy, but maybe if I was ever close to being into dance music, it was probably around the mid-90s. So whether it be the Prodigy, Underworld, Left Field, Massive Attack, like I have a nostalgia for those bands, but it's specifically that opening track by Orbital, which as soon as I heard it, I was like, fuck, I forgot how awesome that track is. So they're playing that, and then he goes into the city, and I know it's been done a million times since, but they have that transition from the city into the whole circuit board thing to go, oh, this is what the inside of a computer looks like. That sequence actually looked really cool, and I understand that. The problem is, and as you've already said there, is when they're having their quote-unquote hack battles or whatever, or even if they're doing anything in the computer, they have to have a visualization. Now, there are two things with this. One, as we've mentioned on previous podcasts, this was still at that kind of like tipping over point where most people didn't have a computer, and you had to, they were like, oh, I don't know how these things work. So you had to have that visualization. And if you don't have a visualization, it's just a boring sequence of someone in front of a computer. I agree with you, though. I think they went a bit overboard where every screen has got like E equals MC squared in the background. Yeah. It's all being reflected on their face. It's if a sequence can be visually overwrought, it is those sequences for sure.
It was really funny as well from a 2024 perspective to see the hacking side of it. Like all the passwords are 3 to 4 letters long, or 3 to 4 characters long, should I say. You've got floppy disks out of coming out of everywhere. They're
So
using
many floppy
they're
disks.
using payphones. Obviously, they're connecting via modem where they got to put their actual. And we didn't even have this in 2000 when we started up because
Mhm.
we had dial up, but they got to connect their telephone to the actual
Yeah.
dial up modem, which is
Mhm.
funny. And then you had the books and stuff as well, like all the books that were
Those are
given it.
all legit, though,
Yeah,
supposedly.
they
Those
are all
books,
legit
yeah.
books, and that's right. Yeah, so seeing that early hacking, and
Mhm.
it's so interesting because even back then, it's such a subculture, and you've got all these
Yeah.
things, and it was
And
interesting, but it was so funny. Like everyone's using God or love or sex or hate, whatever those
mhm.
four passwords were, and I'm just thinking, fucking hell, my work has now told me to use sentences, like just
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and
and
everything.
all these different characters. But yeah, that was the thing in 1995. It felt like, you had like one or two friends maybe who had a computer, and that was it. And the problem with this film is that when it came out, it was very like I remember thinking it was cool. Like it seems lame now when you see them all like, oh, they've all got rollerblades and they're all using pagers, and I'm like, yeah, but in 1995, I wanted a pager. And I used to have rollerblades. We used to rollerblade all the fucking time. So, and even the fashion, yes, it looks gaudy now, but it was very on point in 1995. The thing is with this film, I think when it came out, it had that weird mix of being true to the scene to a certain extent, but then pushing the boundaries a bit for obviously to make it palatable for everyone else. So it had a bit too much jargon for your everyday person, but it wasn't true enough to hacking culture, whatever you want to call that, to work for those guys. So it just seemed to annoy everyone. Then it had that whole thing of it just looking old fashioned for a while. If you watch this film in like, 2005, you'd be like, fuck, man, this is a rough watch. Whereas, and we've talked about this before, I think we said that with Breakfast Club. If you watch Breakfast Club in like 1995, it just seemed cheesy and out of date. But if you wait long enough, it eventually becomes charming and nostalgic. And that's what this film is now. Like, whether the jargon is accurate is no longer relevant. It's so out of date and so ridiculous. Everything about it is so 1995 that you can't help but be kind of charmed by it. And of course, that's not going to do it alone. The reason, well, I certainly think this film remains charming, as I mentioned, I think it is quite well directed, but a massive part of it is the cast, whether it be Johnny Lee Miller, Matthew Lillard, who I don't think anyone ever fucking dressed like Matthew Lillard's character in this film ever. And then, of course, the Plague, who arguably, not arguably, definitely steals the fucking show.
Any of the characters, the way they dress, mine. All right, serial killer dress is ridiculous. Any chance he can get to access his nipple, fine. But
Of course, of course.
you said you said ridiculous. I can't even think what you said. Just outdated, I think, is what you said. It was so long ago. I was trying to keep up with
Yeah,
you.
fair enough.
Razor and Blade, they were
Mm-hmm.
fucking pointless. Like that's what I wanted. They were
Yeah.
ridiculous, and their dress sense was absolutely awful. But I don't. Everything Dade wore seemed to be like he wanted a motorcycle. Like all the coats he wore looked like skid. The skid coats where
Yeah, I
with the
think it
skid plates
wasn't
on it.
just the 95 thing. I think it was like it's clearly aligned with dance culture to a certain extent, and how you still had that in the Matrix. Like at the start, when she takes him to a club and there's a certain kind of music, and I know you can make an argument that that's down to the whole, sexual element of the Matrix and stuff. But I think there's always been that connection, and you can definitely see it with the soundtrack in this movie between like the clubs and the hacker scene, and obviously what was going on in 1995 in terms of like youth cult, quote unquote youth culture. I think maybe that's the reason Razor and Blade, is that what they call Razor and Blade?
Yeah, Razor and Blade.
They're in the movie is just because they have a club, and then they can have a club sequence, because all these movies have to have a fucking club sequence. So I get why they're in it, but if anything, from a purely plot perspective, they're there to connect them to the rest of the world. In fact, they're the first people in this movie who say the word internet. The internet isn't referenced until Razor and Blade do, when they're getting everyone together at the end of the movie. It's just one of those weird things. No, it's like, were they worried that people wouldn't quite get what the internet was in 1995? I mean, I didn't have the internet in 1995. That's a fucking damn sure. So I'm not sure if they were worried it was going to scare people off. But considering all the jargon they were using, I was surprised. I was just like, are they trying to bury the lead with fucking the internet? Absolutely bizarre. But
I love that Hackers Unite scene at the end, and I'm jumping straight to the end, where they've called from all over the world, and you get the like lead singer of the Eurythmics from
what was that about? Why the
from
hell?
England, and then you get like the Russians and the Spanish and the Italians knew. So and like it felt very neo noir as well when they went to the Japan one, and you had those guys on the really small
Do you know
tables
what
and
actually reminded me of loads? Actually, neo noir. There's a scene earlier in the film. It's one of my favorite sequences. The bit where the plague shows up and takes the floppy disk off him, and suddenly it's like he's covered in
yeah,
smoke. It's suddenly like,
yeah.
why is this turned into a 50s noir? But what that really reminded me of, and it's that kind of heavy-handed way we kind of, represented different natures and cultures back in cinema in the 90s. I'm not sure if you remember the sequence from Independence Day when they're sending the message around the world about the strike on
Yeah,
the aliens,
yeah.
and they do it by Morse code. And like the British people are so, oh, we've just received a message, old Morse code. And then they go to like Russians and they're drinking vodka and they got stripy tops and they're smoking cigarettes. It's basically just that sequence again. It's like, oh, you get it. They're from all over the world. And this is as literal as we fucking can be in case you don't get it.
So it was so funny. So is it the guy from the Eurythmics? Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I had to do
Yeah.
the same thing. I was just like, I think that looks like the dude from the Eurythmics. It's because it is the guy from the Eurythmics. And I was still reeling because from at the end of the film, let me see if I've got his name here. They have Frost from Aliens is the reporter at the end of the film. I'm sure it's him. You remember Frost from Aliens?
Yeah, I know Frost.
One
I'm
of the
just looking
colonial
at
Marines.
Yeah.
He does the interview right at the end of the movie, just after you've seen Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. I'm like, these are some weird ass. I'm not sure if you call it a cameo. The reporter is Frost from Aliens. He's just an actor, but he has a
Rico
very
Ross.
yeah. He has a very small role at the end of the movie. You know when you just have that. Is that Frost? Because I'll always just know him as Frost, of course. But yeah, very strange movie. One of the strangest things.
Sorry, you were saying
Go for
it was really weird to say Mark Antony, as in Jennifer Lopez's ex, or the guy who shoots himself in Man on Fire. I know he's a very famous singer as well, but just fucking
Yeah,
Mark Antony rocks up in this.
I don't know why, but I was watching this and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Mark Antony. And obviously did the research, found out it was the research. Like I looked into it, I just checked Google, of course. But I always thought it was interesting when I saw Mark Antony. I was like, oh, it's like that dude is with J-Lo. Like that's an interesting one. When you see him in this movie and you see his bone structure, you're like, he is a striking man. I'm like, this is the first time I got the whole Mark Antony and J-Lo thing. I was like, oh, he looks like a model, in fairness. And he's another weird character. I'm not sure he's necessarily required in this movie, but he's quite fun. But then everybody is.
I'm looking at because I was looking at Mark Antony and I was looking at the full cast and crew list on IMDb, right? And it took me a minute to realize it's not what it is. Mm-hmm. But there's a guy named Blake Willett who is just credited as SS Agent Seattle. And I thought, oh, you don't want to be credited as the SS. Then I realized Secret Service.
Yeah. So you don't want it to be SS. No. You would insist, wouldn't you? It's like, no. You got to put it all in. You can't just put me down as the SS. This movie has black people in, for God's sake. Yeah. Jewish people. What the fuck? No. Can't have that.
I will give you, though. You said it, and we brushed it aside for a minute. Fisher Stevens steals the fucking show. I mean, Fisher Stevens is great in anything he does. Short Circuit, he's good in that. Whether he needs to be good in that, I don't know. But I love Fisher Stevens anyway.
Which movie did he play Indian? Was that Short Circuit?
Short Circuit, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
We've got to do Short Circuit just to talk about Fisher Stevens.
He was good in that, but I don't know if we should be saying he was good in that.
I think it's allowed. It was a different time. I think whenever you ask the question, is it okay? Like, basically, you just look back at the time. Nobody said shit. Of course, we can look back now, retrospectively, and be like, that's a bit fucked up. But it wasn't like, a Breakfast at Tiffany where you're just like, when you see it, you're like, holy fucking shit. This is more of a just, you probably shouldn't have done that. I don't think it's that egregious. Do
you know,
by the standards of the time, I'd like to be clear.
Do you know where else he was in, which was egregious? He was Iggy Koopa, wasn't he, in Super Mario Brothers?
Oh, shit. I totally forgot about that. Yeah. I always think, for some odd reason, the first thing that popped into my head was he was in an episode of Friends back in the day.
Yeah, he was the therapist. Friends. Yeah. But no, he was Iggy Koopa with his cousin Spike or whatever it was.
That's the thing. Whether he's playing Indian people he shouldn't be, or he's in Friends or whatever, whenever I think of Fisher Stevens, I rightly always think of him playing the Plague, or Eugene, as he's known in this film, for which he is absolutely fantastic. In a movie with quite a bit, to outact or to overact Matthew Lillard is a bit, especially Matthew Lillard when he looks the way he does in this fucking movie, is a big ask. And he so comfortably does it. I love the idea as well that they're like, oh, he's evil because he skateboards rather than rollerblades. I was like, when did I guess in the mid-90s, like skateboarding was so unpopular in the mid-90s because it totally dropped off that they were like, oh well, look, he's older and he's uncool, so he skateboards instead of rollerblades.
It was him dressing all in black as well. I honestly thought you were gonna go with for the quote when it was when he was on the laptop. And my God, like they were trying to sell the technology back then, weren't they? You can do all this with your laptop. And he's we are samurai, keyboard cowboys. Like fucking hell.
But that's the
line.
thing. You get that right from the start of the film. We only mentioned earlier, obviously, the visualization when they're, kind of having their keyboard battles, whatever you want to call it, hacking battles. And when Johnny Lee Miller at the start of the film is having, it turns out that he's actually having a hack battle with Angelina Jolie at that point. The way it's strange that early in the film, they actually use a completely different style. So they keep cutting to like TV footage, like, clips from old TV shows to kind of to represent them battling. And then just a moment after, when he first sees Angelina Jolie, they use it again as a stand-in for his emotions. So he's talking to her and they keep flashing things up as if to say, oh, he's awkward, or, my God, he's really horny for her and stuff. But then they completely abandon that style of visual storytelling for the rest of the movie. But it's used so prevalently for the first 15 minutes. I was like, oh, this is a bit rough. It's like, do they do this for the whole film? No, they don't. No. They go to the whole, reflections on screen stuff. And even then towards the end, they change it up slightly. Maybe they were just trying to keep it fresh. It sounds so cheesy when I'm talking about a film like this, by having different styles. And the closest they got to something which I think we probably find more palatable is at the end. I guess it's silly when Johnny Lee Miller puts on his little eyeglass thing when they're going to do, the big hack at the end, and they're down at the train station.
Why was he wearing that?
It didn't make any sense. It was this movie's Nintendo Power Glove. It just made zero fucking sense.
They had the Nintendo Power Glove. Did you see it?
Oh, God. They also had the Nintendo Power Glove.
When they took Joey's stuff, was it Janice or whatever it was? When they took all that, and they're interrogating him, and then he's looking through the window, and he's trying to show him about, and they're holding the Power Glove. Like, what the fuck is this thing?
Of course, what a fine looking piece of kit that it was. And in the same way that in 1995, it seems funny now, that little eyepiece that Johnny Lee Miller put on looked fucking dope in 1995. And I probably thought, well, that's absolutely essential for whatever hacking shit he's about to do. Of course, it makes zero sense. But in that sequence, what they do is they have them each in a phone booth, and maybe it's just the influence of the phone booth on me personally, but the camera spins around them, and it's the closest that the movie ever looks to The Matrix.
Yeah.
And it actually feels a lot more modern, that sequence. I thought that was easily from a visual perspective, the most successful way of going, oh, look, this is like people on a keyboard, but we're going to make it look exciting. Of course, they brought the soundtrack, the score in at the right time. And I was just, oh, this kind of works. The other stuff earlier in the film, it's aged pretty rough, to be honest.
How dumb are the federal agents in this film, right?
Super dumb.
They raid Joey's bedroom. Mm-hmm. They take Janice out. They can't find the disc. They look everywhere. And they don't think to check the air vent directly above his bed.
It's not a shocker.
If I'm a kid, that's a go-to hiding spot for me. So
I don't think you have to be a kid. If you were going to hide something in your room, I'd be like, I couldn't hide it there because it would be too obvious. You mean the fucking vent like in the ceiling, which is easily accessible? If I was going to hide, if anyone was going to hide anything, they would hide it there. It'd be the first place you looked.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous.
How much shit did he have up there? He had his cigarettes, he had his disc, he had his porn. Like everything's
outrageous.
Up there. And why I
get it. Yeah, I get why he would hide it up there, because maybe your mum wouldn't go to the effort of like climbing up there, and it's just like it's out the way, so she's not going to accidentally come across it if it was, say, pornography, for instance.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to hide something from, say, the cops who I thought might show up in my bedroom at any moment, there's no fucking way I'm putting it up there. But like you said, these are dumbass cops. Like, I love Wendell Pierce in this. Is it Agent Dick?
Yeah, Richard Gill, Dick Gill.
Richard Gill. But they call him Agent Dick. When he gets put through the ringer by them doing all their hacking stuff, yes, it is absolutely fantastic what he goes through. But were you ever able, or did a restaurant ever have the power to walk up to you and just cut your fucking credit card in half? Like, when was that ever acceptable?
I think that's a US thing. I honestly think that's a
Really?
US thing. Well, TV has lied to me because I've seen that a number of times in
I
TV.
feel like I had before, but I'm like,
Yeah.
surely they couldn't do it nowadays.
No, I don't
Nowadays.
think they do it now. I need to see your cards declined or something, but I don't think
Yeah,
they've ever
yeah,
just
yeah,
been.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
like, like a normal human being. You're like, oh, sorry, sir, your card is declined. Would you like to try another card, or would you like me to try this one again? Rather than coming over with an oversized comedy
Where
pair
the
of
fuck?
scissors
Like,
and cutting it in half in front of your fucking wife. I'm like, I'd punch that motherfucker in the face if he did that to me.
that dude has literally just come from a ribbon opening, hasn't he? A grand opening.
100%. That's how big those scissors were.
He's opened a TV store somewhere. He's just come in and cut the card up.
But sorry, I know, I do apologize. This was me getting away from Fisher Stevens because you did bring him up.
Oh no, sorry, but before you go back to Fisher Stevens, because
Okay,
I do have another thing. Because you said about cameos, you said about Agent Dick Gill, and but you put him through the ringer. Did you notice the other cameo? The dude from Scream. And I'm making this up.
Yeah.
The voice, it sounded like the dude from Scream. I want to lick you all over, or whatever he was saying.
It did 100% sound like the Scream voice, and it was only a year before, so maybe it had an influence. Who knows? But yeah, Fisher Stevens with the skateboard, the giant keyboard, like Penn from Penn and Teller is in this movie, and they have what can only be described as a computer lair. They literally look like they are working in the Matrix. It is fucking ludicrous. But he's got the coat, and if that isn't enough, Margot is the most clueless executive and apparently criminal of all time. She is, and right, fair play to her. And I should get the actress's name, Lorraine Bracco. She has been in other things. She's obviously a talented actress. In this, she has the most thankless task. She is the person who everyone else explains computer shit to. And basically what they're doing is like, at any moment, they're like, we need to explain this to like people watching this movie. In comes Margot. And we just kind of all the exposition, and she has to be wide-eyed and just look dumb as fuck. And if anything, she's maybe a bit too successful at that because they are the worst fucking criminal duo of all time.
I love how she's seduced by the plague. Like, how is he seducing her for a start? Like, bless Fisher Stevens, and you said their layer as well as they're walking through. Was that real, or was that meant to be something we look at? Because you got these towers of information that's going through it, and it's electricity coming through it. Like, that's an unsafe working environment.
I don't know how. Like, it was clearly supposed to be where they were. I don't think it was like a visual representation for the viewer only, and they're just sitting in a boring room. You saw the keyboard they were working with. That keyboard was from the future. But I mean, I was trying to like basically by the end of the film, Margot and Eugene are like a less annoying version of Darwin and Minerva Mayflower from Hudson Hawk. Like, that's how buffoonish they are by the end of this film. But it almost doesn't matter because, as you said, the plot, like going back to this film, if you had asked me what the plot of Hackers was before I rewatched it, I don't think I'd be able to tell you. The main thing I'd be able to tell you is, it's super 90s and Angelina Jolie's in it. Because that was a massive, massive deal in 1995. This was her breakout movie. She'd been in other movies. This was her first starring role. She was absolutely smoking hot in 1995.
Yeah. And in 1995, if you pause it just right,
you do get to see her boobs.
Yeah.
When she has the dream sequence with Johnny Lee Miller.
He has the dream sequence.
Oh, he has the dream. Well, there are a bunch of dream sequences in this film.
Yeah.
Oh, she has one.
His dream sequence is boobs. Her dream sequence is him in a red PVC dress.
Yeah, I mean, Angelina Jolie from early doors, just an absolute freak fest. Let's be clear.
Even with that haircut,
too much women for all of us. And that is the problem, isn't it? They've taken one of the most beautiful women of the last century and they've said, how can we make her look not so attractive? And they're like, we'll get Josh Hartnett to cut her fucking hair. He's literally got the Josh Hartnett from The Faculty odd pixie cut thing going on. It also doesn't help, and this is a product of the time rather than like any major choice. She has so much eyeshadow on. The way she dresses is ludicrous, but none of us were complaining about that in 1995. It was just, wow, look at this absolute smoke show that is Angelina Jolie. But the one thing I'll give them both is, well, from early doors, you can see that she's clearly a talented actress, and two, I actually think they have chemistry in this film. Johnny Lee Miller and Angelina Jolie totally have chemistry.
Well, enough chemistry, they got married.
Exactly. And, I wonder if he knew on the day they got married that he was in over his head. Because supposedly when they got married, she was wearing black PVC pants, a white top, and she had written his name in blood on the back of her top with a needle, which she did herself. Do you think like he would looked over and thought, man, this is not going to last. I am just not like there was only one man crazy enough to take on Angelina Jolie, and apparently that was Billy Bob Thornton. That was the relationship we all wanted to stick and just see how fucking crazy they went together. But I mean, as hot as she was, if she shows up on your wedding day with your name written in blood on her top, you're like, oh man, I'm in over my fucking head.
I mean, yeah, well, they took it a step further, didn't they? Didn't they wear vials of each other's bloods around their neck?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That was
Thornton,
Billy Bob. Yeah. Because he knew, like, well, she was so much younger than him. He was punching above his weight, but you know, so he was like down for whatever freaky shit she was going for. So yeah, like, but that was the weird thing. It was like that seemed like almost acceptable. Like we just like early 2000s, we were just like, Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie are just wearing each other's blood, because I think there was like that mystery attached to celebrities still at that point, because it was before all social media. It was when celebrities gave less of a fuck, and it was just like that was all you saw. Just like, oh well, you know, celebrities are out of their fucking minds, so this is what they do apparently.
It's funny as well, isn't it? Because it was amicable, that one. Like they separated 18 months later because they realized they probably made a mistake. And apparently they're still good friends and stuff. But yeah, he probably just looked at her and said, look, love, I'm losing so much blood. I just can't keep doing it.
I can't keep doing this. Remember when Angelina Jolie kissed her brother on like the red carpet? But like kissed him. Like imagine if that happened now, like the most famous woman in the world. Because it's like, for like, I'd say like 4 or 5 years, Angelina Jolie was probably the most famous person on the planet. With the whole her and Brad Pitt and the whole Jennifer Aniston thing. She was so outrageously famous. And what, for 5-6 years, she was probably the biggest movie star in the world? Is that fair to say? Around the time she was doing like Wanted, Mr. and Mrs. Smith and all that shit? I don't think that's too much of a stress. We just like take the most famous actor or actress in the world and have them just openly kiss their sibling on the red carpet. The internet would just fucking break down. I don't want to say break the internet. Sorry, that is a douche thing to say, but it would certainly get a reaction. That's for fucking sure. But anyway, sorry, back to the movie.
Well, actually, I go back to the movie. I was just looking at that then. So he married Angelina Jolie in 1996. Hackers is his first film. So he first starred in the film Hackers in 95 with Jolie. And then shortly after Hackers, he was cast as Sick Boy in Trainspotting. Ewan McGregor suggested him for the role. So I don't know where he met Ewan McGregor, but
God knows. Obviously, just pretending with his Scottish accent. But he's fantastic in that. And he's like, I think a lot of people probably would have had quite a bit of stock in Johnny Lehman, thinking, oh, this guy's going to be the next big thing. But for one reason or another, just never, like, you know, he's had a successful career, but he's never been like the movie star that, you know, the kind of mid-90s were certainly suggesting. But
hey, how does the Plague's plan work to frame his mum? I'm going to make your mum this woman, and then when they arrest her, I'm going to change her back to this woman, so she's going to get lost in the system. Okay, but if they can't find her on the system, don't they go, well,
mate, it was computer stuff. Like that's basically what they're suggesting, is because he's a whiz with computers, nobody will be able to understand it. He can do whatever he wants. He can change her details. She'll get arrested, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that is basically it. There might be a bit more of an explanation, but I took it as, oh, look, I'm really, really good at computers, so I can do this. And I'm on the inside track. I'm working with the police already. I'll fuck your life over. And that's what leads to that really weird no, it's not neo-noir. It just becomes a noir sequence because it's in the city. Everything's covered with smoke, and he skateboards alongside the car to snatch a floppy disk off him. I'm like, is that the most 90s thing in this movie? I don't know, because the rest of it looks like it's something from the 50s. But
you said he's great with computers as well.
Mm-hmm.
You said turn your computer on, set it to receive a file. Yeah, my computer's on.
Yeah,
but set it to receive a file. No, my computer's on.
It's one of those things for us. But I mean, the general plot is, I mean, if you take away all the noise that's surrounding it and the hacking and the sinking of the ships and all that jazz, ostensibly it's the same plot as Superman 3 and Office Space. It's basically just skimming. I think they call it slicing the beef. No, that sounds like something I read in like saw on Pornhub or something. It's something less gross than that, but it's basically the idea of like taking like a cent off every $100 in the system, and you keep doing it to all these transactions. They don't notice it, but there's so many transactions that you eventually become a millionaire. It's basically that, and then he uses the ship thing to frame the hackers. But that is exactly what Richard Pryor was doing in Superman 3, and it was definitely what they were doing in Office Space. So this isn't like a new thing, but of course, it's not very exciting in and of itself, so you need all that crap around it. But the plot isn't really all that important. It's just a a way to say, oh, look at these quote unquote cool young people doing something exciting in 1995. And for the most part, it works. And as I mentioned, I mean, there's no escaping. And I think one of the reasons people will find it charming now is just how 90s it is. So I've got like a list here of just 90s shit in this movie. So there's rollerblades and smoking in abundance. So many rollerblades, so much fucking smoking. Everything about Matthew Lillard is just 90s as fuck. 3, not just Wipeout, but like a make-believe arcade version of Wipeout from the original PlayStation. It's not just the fact that he's playing on a giant screen with what looks like an arcade controller. It's for the most part Wipeout, but then he does stuff in that game which doesn't exist in the PlayStation version. So it's a little bit kind of wizard.
It's an early version. So the video game that Keaton, after her day to playing in Cyberdelia, is an early version of Wipeout, and it was released on September 95.
Ah, there we go. There we go. Number 4, pages on Jodie's wrist. So not just a page, but on her wrist. Razor and Blade hacking their way to free payphone calls. It's like that's one of the things. Like, if you do this, you can get free payphone calls. Like, is there anything more 90s than that? Floppy disks on every computer. See-through technology. Remember how much of a thing that was?
Yeah.
Remember you used to be able to get like a Game Boy or the original Xbox. They were see-through. They used to be fucking dope. That's just disappeared now. Everyone having rooftop apartments in central New York, despite the fact that they're clearly students. It's just no big deal. It's like, do you know how fucking rich you have to be to have a rooftop apartment in New York now? They'd have to be billionaires. It's ridiculous. Eyeshadow and every piece of clothing. Not a single person doesn't look like they're dressed for 1995. Those are just some of the things that
I need to mention one more.
Go for it.
Cassettes. Matthew Lillard or Serial selling that compilation of album of every artist that's asphyxiated on their own vomit.
Fantastic.
I love it. I love it when he's saying it as well, because he's so happy when he's saying it, and it's just drool, just saliva coming out of the corner of his mouth. He's so pleased that he's made an album of people that have just choked on their own puke.
Well, he was going big back then. You think of like just the next year he's in Scream. And as that movie he goes big early doors and then just keeps turning it up and up and up. That was kind of his shtick. I'm going to give massive performances, and then one day I'm going to be Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. So there's that. That's interesting, because that was the first thing. Because my wife had never seen this movie before. She said, "Oh, that's the guy from Scooby-Doo." I would always have him as the guy from Scream, well ahead of Scooby-Doo. So I guess just reference points and stuff.
Dead Man's Curve for me.
Oh, there we go. I wasn't expecting that one. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so you it's weird trying to find out ways to talk about this film, because we've already talked about the ending and not much actually happens. They just kind of live in their life. They spend so much time explaining what hackers are and have them just in rooms, typing away. It's all kind of irrelevant. I find it quite interesting that when they decide they're going to try and hack the Gibson, and they're trying to figure out what's happened and stuff, and they're all sitting in, I think it's Lord Nikon's apartment. And, they kind of give the impression that John Lee Miller's character has been working on it for days. And, they all start working with him, and they all kind of have their epiphany moment at the same time. Why, when they do that, considering they're working on computers, is there so much paper? There are fucking reams and reams of paper. They don't even appear to have
the screen is so small, you've got to print it out so you can see a bigger version of it.
I think it was just that age when we were just used to it. I think of even like the job I've currently got now. We used to print off everything. And then one day we're just like, why the fuck are we printing off all this paper?
Well, absolutely for your job, where you're a transponster, of course you've got to fucking...
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, they actually... Sorry, Karen.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because you were on about they were hacking and they were doing they were hacking the Gibson. Right at the end again, and they managed to copy the garbage file for the umpteenth time. How painfully obvious! Again, this is why the Secret Service is stupid. He sees serial killer in Johnny Lee Miller, Dade, sees serial killer in the crowd with a cap and a pizza. They're trashing the planet. They're trashing our rights. They're trashing this. They're trashing that. If I was Mark Anthony, I'd go, "Oh, do you know Dade? He's saying trash a lot. Do you think he might have chucked something in the?
I think there might be something
in the rubbish bin. Yeah, maybe.
And he definitely seems to be shouting at that guy specifically. There seems to be, but we've already agreed that.
I'm sorry. What do you mean? The guy that's actually turning around and shouting back? Like it could be that. And how the fuck did serial killer go right to it's Grand Central Station? There's more than one rubbish bin.
I mean, yeah, did he go through all? I guess maybe he's seen them walk out, so maybe he's just gone to the nearest one and got lucky. Or maybe there's like a longer cut this movie where, like, for 30 minutes, it's just him going through fucking bins at
That was
Grand Central
that
Station.
was
I
a
don't know.
great shot behind your back, though, wasn't it? Just you got your hands in handcuffs. They haven't searched you, by the way, after they've handcuffed you because they didn't find the floppy disk down your pants, which
Yeah, of
again, not
course.
a euphemism. And he manages to take it out and hoik it into the to the rubbish bin with
Mhm.
perfect aim from behind
It's a
his
good
back.
shot. Could
Yeah,
have easily fucked that shot, but it's like we said, a lot of the sequence is just them naturally on computers. They do actually broaden their horizons somewhat towards the end of the film. Like I was going to say, this actually feels like a New York movie, and part of that is obviously you have the sequence at the end where, for reasons, they have to do some of their hacking on top of the Empire State Building. Most of this film was actually shot in Vancouver, but I think they do enough work on location in New York that this genuinely feels like a New York movie, to the point where I'm not sure if you had the same feeling when they're gearing up towards that final showdown with the plague and they're going to get everyone working together, blah, 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 and they're going to go after the Gibson. It almost felt a little bit like the first Ghostbusters movie. You know, when it's like they show up and they're pretending to be like builders and they're like digging into the
yeah.
ground stuff. There is an element to that. There's even one bit when Angelina Jolie's character very nearly kills a security guard. She shoots a
With a
flare at
flare gun.
his fucking face. But you have like, I don't know if they really needed to be at the top of the Empire State Building. I'm not sure if they needed to kind of break into all these buildings, but it looked kind of cool and added a bit of additional drama to the end of the film, at least, rather than just going to another sequence with them going on computers. And if anything, excuse me, I think the film does get more confident in the way it's shooting those sections. As I mentioned, the sequence with them all at the payphones at Grand Central Station, sorry, does actually look kind of cool. So
Well,
by the
that's
end
it,
of the
isn't it?
film, I was kind of on board.
You can't put him. You can't put him in the basement, like I said, clickety clacking on the computer.
You
So you've
can't.
got to
You
think,
can't.
oh, what can we do? Let's put him on top of the Empire State Building because this won't look dodgy at all. Just a bunch of guys with some
How did they
computers.
get up there? How the
Yeah,
fuck did they get up there?
and when they're hacking, just in the middle of the street, you got Lord Nikon holding the laptop open. He's just holding it like a briefcase,
Yeah, yeah.
whilst Dade Murphy just again tippity taps on the computer. And in order to make that sound more interesting, then you've got Angelina Jolie behind him reading everything that he's doing. Wanted now, transvestites welcome, and all that stuff. And it's just you got
It's
to try and
silly, of
make it more
course.
interesting than it actually
And
is.
they do a decent job. I mean, that's the reason that Penn's and the Plague's lair exists. Like, where even is that lair? Is it at Eugene's house? Is it like, have they paid for it at the company? I don't even know where it is. Have I
Yeah, no.
missed
So
something?
they're in the IT department of the company.
Yeah, and that's their fucking IT department. What the
Apparently,
fuck is going on? It's absolutely insane.
is this
Surely, even in 1995, somebody must have come up and gone, wait, this is supposed to be like just part of the company's IT department. Like, yeah, the giant red keyboard, which makes all those fucked up sounds, yeah. With the lightning on the really lightning, this is just going to be in a company. Yeah, this is what we're going for, and we're just sticking with it. It's maybe the craziest thing in the movie.
Well, you look at all that and go, what do you do? Do you like send spaceships into? No, no, no. We just transfer oil from one place to another via freight.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And nobody really, I know there was an element of like back in the day, it's like, well, we kind of need an IT department because that's the way the world's going. And nobody really knows what's going on. And maybe again, the 90s, you know, the economy was booming. They could have thrown a lot of money at them. I still don't know, even in the 90s, how they got away with that fucking layer underground. And he's got all those people in like get-ups and he treats everyone like shit. Nobody's saying anything. It's of its time, should we say? It's of its time.
Was this the first iteration as well of that you could think of showing like companies hiring a hacker to be their security person? Because it happens a lot from from what I can
Yeah,
gather.
well, you hire
Yeah.
people. It goes back to stuff like Catch Me If You Can, where they hire Leonardo DiCaprio's character at the end to figure out forgeries because he's the best in the world at it. So yeah, you hire criminals to kind of catch criminals. Like yes,
Yeah,
long
and you
history of
wonder, and you don't think he's ever going to try and steal off you. Like he's not going to try and create a worm that'll take 25 million, and if he gets caught, he's going to sink
that.
all our tankers.
Especially that guy who's such a dick. And the thing is, right, I was a little annoyed at the start of the film because it's like the jargon, the way they talk to each other, you know, the plague, all that. Like, I was just like, they're so nerdy. But then I was like, but yeah, they were nerds. That's the whole point. They're fucking nerds. None of them are actually all that cool. And it's hard to actually judge now because I was like, what, 13 when this came out. So I would have had really no concept of like, judging, 18, 19-year-olds if they were cool then. But, is anyone able to like say with any confidence, were these people ever cool? I have no idea now because we're so far removed from it now. All I can see is being like charmingly cheesy and that's it.
Do you know the Plague's get-up as well? And I'm probably the only person who's going to actually come up with this. The Plague's get-up honestly felt like they'd copied Brad Dourif from Death Machine.
That might just be you, yeah, in fairness.
Okay, so I didn't know whether or not that was.
I've got a better, more relatable one for you. At the end of the movie, and
Liam watches all these films. Rob just watches shit films that nobody's seen.
I mean, that's true to a certain extent, but we'll get onto this in a minute. You would have seen this film as well. Throughout the film, they're building up towards this potential date between Angelina Jolie's character and Johnny Lee Miller. Now, a lot of that doesn't make sense because he's betting her, like if she loses that she has to go on a date with him. Then she changes her bet. Oh, if I win, you have to wear a dress on our dates. It's like, well, no, if you win, you don't have to go on the date because that's his part. Anyway, it doesn't matter. When they finally do go on the date at the end, why, oh, why is Angelina Jolie just like Associate Bob from Demolition Man? Because that's exactly what she looks like.
And why is he wearing the dress? When I first saw him and he had that really long flow, I say long, it was really long flowing coat at the bottom, but then it was really tight on the hips. It honestly looked like he was wearing a dress.
Let's be clear. If you're like 18 in 1995 and Angelina Jolie asks you to do something, you're going to fucking do it. And especially him, the whole thing, he's a virgin. Like they try and play up the whole, like he's a computer nerd, despite the fact that, he's clearly quite handsome and stuff. Yes, you're going to say, whatever you want, dear, you are outrageously hot because.
Right, I'm going to show you this picture now, which doesn't work for a podcast, but that's Brad Dourif from Death Machine.
Yeah, that does
is
look like him.
So the Plague. Long black hair, the long black coat.
Is it the same year as well?
94.
94. Is it a good movie?
I think it's great.
I love that caveat. I think it's great.
I think it's great.
Does the rest of the world think it? What's the IMDb score, just out of interest? Because I don't doubt, listen, you'll throw up the occasional curveball, but usually if you're picking stuff for the podcast, they often pay off. Hard Target being an example from last week. I had my concerns. Hard Target was fucking dope. So,
well, Hackers was 6.2. Death Machine was 5.6. Okay. Director for Death Machine, Stephen Norrington.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Starring Brad Dourif. The very first introduction of Rachel Weisz.
Oh, cool. It's just not on my radar at all.
It's not on anybody's radar, dude. Wait.
I'm gonna see. I know this is supposed to be an audio, medium. I have to look up the poster just in case I've come across it. Death Machine, you say, yeah?
Yeah, Death Machine, yeah.
Machine. Sorry to everyone listening.
19... No,
No, I just have to see the poster. Ooh. Nope, never seen it before. Never come across it.
Yeah, so but Stephen Norrington, I think, who wrote there as well, is loving so his characters in there, right? John Carpenter, Sam Raimi, Wayland, a character named Wayland, a character named Yutani. Richard Brake plays Scott Ridley.
It's a bit on the nose, but in fairness, like Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 52%. So
yeah,
more than half the people who watch this film thought it was at least decent. So yeah, and like you say, you're saying some decent names there. Maybe I need to give it a chance.
I'm gonna have to see if I can dig the DVD out so you can have it for this podcast.
I mean,
where we can watch it.
Kind of want to talk about Margot, like that whole sequence when that, like, again, she's brought into the room to sound silly. Rabbit, flu shot, somebody talk to me. Everything she says in that last sequence, it just annoys the shit out of me.
Cancer, brain, and she just doesn't
brain cancer. I don't understand it. It's like, well, just stop talking. It feels like because they're all doing their thing. Like I get it. He feels the need for somebody to say something. And it just, Margot just saying terrible, terrible things. She's bad in this film. But is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up? Or move on to more specifically, favourite scene?
Right. The only other thing I wanted to mention was right at the beginning when he's hacking into the TV station to get rid of the neo-evangelist guy and put Outer Limits. His fucking glasses are ace. And I honestly thought you would have brought that up. I don't know why.
About that.
But his glasses, is like they looked a bit like Morpheus glasses, but had the actual arms. They were ace. I thought they were really good.
Well, it's just the look of it. But the thing is, movies of this kind, they had like a similar aesthetic. And I think part of it goes back to Lawnmower Man. That kind of really established that kind of cyber, aesthetic on screen to a certain extent, especially for 3D stuff, anything computer related, even though they famously, for the stuff which is in the computer, they didn't actually use CG. They actually used physical effects for that.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is like the same year as Johnny Mnemonic, the net, like right after I watched this film, because I watched this on Amazon, if you just leave it running, it'll just start playing another film, like a movie you might like thing. It goes directly into Johnny Mnemonic. And the opening sequence, while it's more cyber crime shit, whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. It's into the computer. It looks like a cityscape. All these films were doing it. And they're all cheap. If you go back and watch The Net, it's fucking rough. Johnny Mnemonic, I know you have a soft spot for. It's not a great watch nowadays. It might be a fun watch, but it's not a good watch. I
haven't seen Johnny Mnemonic in about 25 years. So
the first thing upset me was like, oh, it's the future, so we're just going to shave off his sideburns. So it's like his hair comes up. It's just a bad haircut. Bad haircut. Favorite scenes? We've already mentioned it. For me, it's just Eugene showing up on a skateboard to take the floppy disk as the movie just briefly goes noir. It's absolutely insane, that sequence, but it's shot wonderfully. I'm not convinced it belongs in this movie, other than the aforementioned floppy disk, of course.
For me, it's again another Eugene one, or the plague, is when he first rocks up to rescue Penn, just as Joey hacks in. It's because he just skates through the death towers.
we both just like Eugene just skateboarding. That's it.
But the reason why I like that one is because he stops. He goes, "Have no fear, I is here."
I wonder how self-aware it is. Like, I like him right up until the end. Like the last sequence when he's on the plane and he's in
when he's dressed like Fu Manchu.
Yeah, he's dressed like Fu Manchu, and they inexplicably, these idiot detectives wait to arrest him like in the air. Like, why didn't you just arrest him on the ground? It makes no sense.
They gotta get all the way back to Tokyo, wherever he's going. Get on another flight and fly home.
Fly back.
That's why the Secret Service is stupid in this film.
Well, it also goes to show, again, it's the night, and maybe that gives, explains the computer room, because there was that much money in the 90s. There was so much money that they wouldn't have to sign off with work. They're just like, oh yeah, we're going to fly to Tokyo. Like, can you arrest him here? It's like, we'll arrest him in the air. And they just fucking got away with it. It's outrageous waste of money. But it was good. Like, I love the fact that they went as far as to have him. I didn't think about the fact that he's dressed as Fu Manchu, but yes, he was. But the whole arrest sequence at the end, and just a fine cap to a utterly silly movie.
Loves
number one for me is the soundtrack. I already mentioned at the top some of the bands involved, so I won't repeat that, but I think it makes the movie. It obviously, I don't think you need anything else to remind you that this film's from 1995, but it is a reminder that some things from 1995 are actually kind of cool. Number two, the cast totally makes the movie. It's a perfectly serviceable movie for the most part, but it really is the cast that maybe elevates it and certainly has turned it into a cult classic. And as I mentioned earlier, as much as I love the cast, Eugene and Margot are the worst villain combo of all time. Like I said, a less annoying version of Darwin. Yeah, because they're so bad. Like, they're memorably terrible. Like, how much of this podcast have we spent talking about Eugene in particular? He's useless. He's like such a nerd. He's clearly just a loser, but he's so incredibly memorable. Like, if she was like an absolute smoke show and they were like these geniuses, I just don't think it'd be that memorable. But I'm just going to jump directly into my hates, because my number one hate is also Eugene and Margot are the worst villains combo of all time. So it depends at any given moment how I want to look at them. 1 minute I'm like, they're so much fun. The next moment I'm like, this film is just so dumb. And a big part of it is the Margot and Eugene combo. My second hate is just so 90s to the point of being distracting, I would say. And number three, letting Josh Hartnett cut Jolie's hair, as I mentioned earlier. Absolutely unforgivable that they would do that to 1995 Angelina Jolie.
Well, we're not going to be far off of it already. So my first love is Eugene. I think Fisher Stevens is great, but I've said I think Fisher Stevens is great.
Oh, him individually, he's fantastic.
Yeah. The cast for my third, I think the cast are great for the most part.
They're just memorable. Like, even Joey, like, he's memorable because he's so young and he smokes 2 cigarettes at the same time. Like, you've got 5, 6 of them. Not many of them get that much screen time. But again, if you can take someone like Matthew Lillard, you can give him 2 minutes screen time. He's going to do something that's going to make you remember him. So,
and my third one was Just, do you know what? I fucking forgot what my third one was. Let me get my phone up. Right, I'll go. While I'm looking, I'll go into my hates. So my first hate is Margot. I think she's stupid.
Yeah,
Absolutely
she's
pointless. Yeah,
terrible. And as I said,
yeah,
she is there just to be a stand-in for
yeah.
the cinema. Like they're basically when they're talking to her, what they're really doing is explaining shit to you. She's just a proxy for the audience.
Is Jolie's hair? I
Yeah, it's
think
terrible.
Jolie's hair is, yeah, it's terrible. She is absolutely stunning, and then that hair just doesn't help her at all. I don't know what the fuck, why they got Josh Hartnett back, but apparently he's good at cutting people's hair or bad at cutting people's hair, which is good for them. I'm not
Definitely,
too sure.
definitely bad at cutting people's
Yeah,
hair. Yeah, yeah. So we
and
did the faculty a few weeks ago, and that might seem strange if you just jump in directly to this podcast, but it wasn't that long ago we covered the faculty, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about Josh Hartnett's absolutely bonkers haircut.
the fact that it's aged a lot, like
Oh, yeah.
the way they're hacking and everything like that. And I know you watch it for the time, but it just feels silly now.
It
So
does, but
I
think
think
that
it's
was
aged quite a bit, and it's just not. It's kind of had a detriment to it if you're watching it in the future or 2024. So
I'd
I'm
say
not a
I
huge
would
fan
put
of that.
that in the same category as the Eugene and Margot thing, where you could almost put it in both. If you're watching it a certain way, if you're trying to take this film in any way seriously as a movie, it doesn't work because, like you said, it's aged so ridiculously and it's so of its time that it becomes distracting. If, however, you're watching this in that kind of cult way, like I said, it becomes charming. I think the '90s stuff almost helps because that ostensibly becomes the movie. As we already mentioned, the plot doesn't really matter. So instead, what you're really doing is you're watching these ridiculous characters dressed in ridiculous ways, rollerblading around, wearing sunglasses. Like there's a scene where Lord Nikon literally puts on sunglasses to see something better.
Yeah,
It's that dumb.
in the
Like
dark.
in the dark, it's
Yeah,
dark. It's not even a light room. It's a dark room, and he goes, "I need to basically take a closer look at this. How am I going to do that with motherfucking sunglasses?"
yeah. Well,
That's the
they're all
kind of
what. That's where they're all watching him take her top off, wasn't it?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and because that is so fundamentally silly, it adds to the charm of the movie because nothing really matters when you watch this anymore. You're like, just look how dumb.
No, I
And
think
it's sorry, but yes, the other side of it is
yeah.
also if you're trying to watch this as an actual movie, then it is absolutely detrimental.
I think we're looking at it two different ways. I just think it's aged poorly, if I'm honest with you.
I
My
think I'm.
third
I think
love,
in my defense, I think I'm looking at it both ways.
yeah.
Like it's not a great movie, but it depends on how charming you find it on the other side, I suppose.
Right. So my third love was the character Dade Murphy, the name. I love that name, Dade. I
Dade
do.
is
I love Dade.
terrible,
No, it's not.
terrible.
It's so good. It is so
Dade.
good. But I think I got shtick for wanting to name my kid Wade, not because of fucking Deadpool, by the way.
Wade.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah, and
that
you
was never
rightly got
happening.
stick. See, I'm glad that you got told. Wade, Dade, these are not great names at
They're
all.
great. They're
Do you
great.
have any alternative titles?
Yeah, they're not good alternative titles, but we're gonna go through them anyway.
You're gonna get them regardless.
Yeah. Brazil, hackers, computer pirates.
Okay, it's gonna be a lot
Uh,
of this, isn't it?
well, French Canada, pirates.
Just pirates.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be doing that.
Or Ecuador, double down. Hackers, comma, hackers.
Oh, I quite like those. You do get those occasionally when we look back at these movies where they just do the title twice.
Uh, France, hackers, the cyberspace pirates.
I don't like the whole pirate thing. They don't feel like pirates.
Germany, hackers in the network of the FBI.
No, that's terrible.
Greece, network intrusion.
No, no, it's not fun enough. It sounds too serious.
Hungary, data stealers.
That's okay.
Japan, cybernet.
Cyber, we just word smash.
And that's
Cyber computer net.
it.
I
That's
probably
it.
like the Japanese one the most. Any facts for this film?
Yep. So the hacking sequences, the scenes where you see the inside of a computer, are mostly motion control models
Oh,
because
that's it.
director Ian Softly thought that the actual computer graphics would look too artificial. The cast were given 3 weeks to hang out together to get to know each other better and learn how to rollerblade properly before filming began.
I
They
know that.
also
It's so
spent
essential. You have to learn how to rollerblade.
they also spent most
Absolutely. Sorry.
shut up. They also spent most of the time studying computers and hacking.
Well, that too. I love the fact that was secondary to rollerblading.
Eugene Belford used the pseudonym Babbage at the end of the film. Charles Babbage was the inventor of an early form of the computer. The film's writer, director, and some cast members attended the New York City 2600 meeting, a monthly hangout of the local hacker community to observe and talk with real life hackers.
Fair enough.
What else have we got here? I've already said the video game. All of the hacker handles proposed by Joey were actual handles already used by real hackers. Bless him. That was a MacGuffin, wasn't it? He never actually got a name, a hacker name. He needed a handle. He suggested some handles, and he never gave him one.
Is that a MacGuffin?
Not a MacGuffin.
Misnomer, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I guess it is weird that he was just called Joey. I mean, there's like we mentioned, there were some things that were clearly taken from the hacking scene, like, and some of it seems quite cheesy, like the arf thing when he wins at the end. That was supposedly taken directly from an actual hack. The Cookie Monster thing, you think, oh, that might just be a visual trick. That's actually from a real program. So there is a combination of things that actually accurate, but I like I said, I don't think it has any impact on my enjoyment of this movie at all.
When Zero Cool tries to get a razor and blade on stage and gets thrown off by security, and he ends up crowd surfing, someone can quickly be seen trying to steal his bright orange beeper from his belt. So I don't think that was it. Was just one of the extras thinking, I want that.
I'm just going to take the bright orange beeper. But a bright orange beeper in '95, Jesus Christ, would have been so cool. Like I said, I definitely wanted a beeper growing up. I don't know why. No one was fucking calling me, but it just looked cool. And I'm going to go on record and say beepers still kind of look cool. There's like a retro coolness to them. Absolutely useless, but they look pretty ace.
The poster for this movie shows Acid Burn and Crash Override with various words and ASCII symbols transposed on their faces. Amongst the words are names of hackers in the movie, including Lord Nikon, Acid Burn, and Crash Override. Some of the commonly used passwords according to Plague, such as God, Sex, Love, and Secret. Freak, a phone freak, a hacker who concentrates their knowledge on telephone systems. Phantom Freak was the main freaker in the hacker group. I love how that was a thing as well. My speciality is just hacking payphones.
Yeah, it was a limited skill set, wasn't it? It was like, that's not going to last all that long. Although the poster of this film isn't very good. Although the movie itself does have one of the coolest posters of all time. It's got a Metropolis poster. I think it's in Angelina Jolie's bedroom of all things. Awesome movie poster. Much better than the actual one for this one, anyway.
Right, so two more from me now. So Ian Softly auditioned Hilary Swank, Heather Graham, and Liv Tyler for the role, which ultimately went to Angelina Jolie. And then Angelina Jolie has complained that the movie typecast her to play tough women with guns, the kind who wear no bra and a little tank top.
Well, yeah, there's no arguing with that. Did you ever see Ian? Because we've not really talked about Ian Softly, and I haven't seen too many of his films. But you ever watch the movie? Like, if you go back, most of his movies actually had pretty decent reviews. So it's like he did Backbeat in '94. That was like the Beatles one. Yeah. Wings of the Dove in '97. Skeleton Key in '05. But the one which caught my attention is one I've seen before is K-Pax from '01. I'm not sure if you ever watched that film.
Yeah, that's the one where Kevin Spacey thinks he's an alien, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember that film being a pretty big deal when it came out. And I've not seen it since like '01, '02. I think I went to see it in the cinema. But I remember it being decent. It's got good reviews as well.
This is where me and you stand out, because you thought K-Pax when you looked at his list, and I went directly to Inkheart for how bad it was. The one with Brendan Fraser and Paul Bettany.
Yeah, Jesus
where
Christ,
he
yeah,
jumps
that was
into
bad.
a book. Yeah, where he jumps.
Did he direct that as well?
Yeah, he directed Inkheart. Yeah.
Okay, well, he's had some good films anyway. Hug to the Future, so it's where we ask the question, remake, sequel, Let It Die or Leave Well Alone. Let it die. Let it die. It'd be hard to visualize computers now in the same way, and folk are far too familiar with computers. I just don't think it would work, but this is so a movie of its time. As we mentioned, it's one of those films where I don't think anyone's like, oh, the premise is fantastic. The reason it works is the cast, are the characters. You're not going to recreate that. Like, let it die, 100%.
Yeah, it's as you just said, it's a movie of its time. It doesn't need to be done now. Mm-hmm. It was fine back then. If you do hackers now, it's just going to get utterly ridiculous. We've seen it before. We have lots of hacking sequences in films. You get the film like Christopher Thor. What's his name? Christopher Thor. Chris Hemsworth. He did Black Hat. We get all these hacker films going along, and they just they can be good and they can be bad. But this one, just leave it in the past. Just leave it where it is.
I'm not even sure if the hacking element. I know it's weird saying about a film called Hackers is the reason it's memorable. I think it's just like it's such a visual and audible representation of its time. I think that's maybe the reason it's lived on. Make a change. This is where we ask a question. If you could only make one change to make this film better, I mean, the obvious answer is better haircut for Angelina Jolie, probably. I, tone down some of the terrible computer jargon, but I guess that's what makes it legit. So no, I'm going to stick with the haircut. Yeah, definitely. Just don't do that to her hair. Don't do that to somebody so beautiful. Why would you do it?
Right. So usually we come up with some pretty good ideas for this, for things that we think would make the film better, or we believe it would make better. With something like this, you're not going to be able to do one thing that would make it better.
That's what I mean. That's what I've gone for the haircut.
Yeah.
And if I'm taking it seriously, it's just not happening.
Yeah. And for me, it's either an explanation or maybe get rid of the death towers in the IT security room.
Yeah, an explanation would be nice. Like somebody walks into the room and goes, "What the fuck are those?" And then Margot tries to explain it or something.
As you're about to walk in, they say, "Please don't bring any metal because you will create you'll create a ground. You will conduct it."
It's such an odd just space that they've created. I'd be interested to know what the set actually looked like, but hey ho. In terms of video games, there wasn't a Hackers video game, unsurprisingly. If I was going to go recreate it today, I would go with Watch Dogs by Ubisoft, and I'd just go full 90s version. So it's like it's open world. It's set in New York instead of, I think the original Watch Dogs was set in Chicago of all places. So set in New York, which isn't exactly new for a fucking video game, but they're just cutting about on rollerblades and they're using 90s technology and pages and all that jazz. So yeah, I'd have Ubisoft, the Watch Dogs team, go for a full 90s version of this movie.
So I was pretty much with you. I would have gone Ubisoft as well for Watch Dogs for that, if I was thinking that. But what I ideally would like to see is like a NES emulated version where you've got the old 90s graphics, where you've got your 2D side-scrolling character going through on rollerblades,
throwing floppy disks at bad guys.
Floppy disks, avoiding cards, and then at the end, then he's got to get to the next level. Then he's got to do a quick little hack, and maybe that's a mini game within the game. And then
I don't know why that immediately brought to mind. Remember Paperboy from back in the day?
Yes, yeah.
I don't know how that would work as a game for this, but it also back then it didn't matter if it didn't really make sense. Like if you just had them rollerblading and you just had the aesthetic, and they were just throwing like floppy disks at houses which just looked a bit computery, you'd be like, yeah, that'd work. That'd work.
It's like Home Alone, the Home Alone game, where it was just him just throwing things whilst the spider ran across the screen, if I remember rightly. On that
yeah. They just had to basically they just took some of the visual tropes from the film and then just made yet another side-scrolling platformer. That's all they did. It didn't really have anything to do with the movie it was based on. And you could do the same with Hackers. So I actually, just because I love Paperboy, I think that's maybe the correct answer, because I can totally visualize the Paperboy version of Hackers, the video game from 1995. Ratings and recommendations. This will be interesting because I suspect you'll be lower than me. I'm going to go with 3 and no. If you have fond memories of it, I would say go back and give it a go, because I think it's probably aged a bit better than you suspect. I found this film quite charming. I thought it was surprisingly well directed. I thought the cast was fantastic. Of course, it's aggressively of its time. And as I suspect, we're going to disagree on this ever so slightly. It depends how you watch it. If you're watching this as a serious film, it's not going to fly at all, because it's just too of its time. There's too much jargon. It's all just a bit too silly. I actually find it more charming now than I did when I was growing up, but I watch it in a completely different way. I don't watch this and think, wow, these kids are cool. I'm like, this film is fucking stupid, but I'm having a fun time watching it. So I'm going to go with a 3, but I'm still not going to go round to some random dude in the street and say, dude, have you seen fucking 1995 Hackers? You need to get on that shit immediately. That is not happening.
No, I haven't watched this film for a while. I think I've only seen it once or twice before. And after watching it, I'm probably not going to watch it again unless I forget all about it. On that note, it's a 2. I mean, there's good things in it, but yeah, it's just not for me in regards to go. It's not one of those ones that I love going back to or watching it for any kind of reason.
No.
So yeah, so it's a 2, and it's definitely a no. Like it's not one I'm shouting from the rooftops. You've got to watch Hackers. Hackers is great. It's not.
No, but I suspect, and the reason that it's lived on, if you went to the cinema and watched this with a like-minded group of people, like a late night showing of Hackers, I bet you it'd be fun. Like it's that ludicrous. It falls into like that kind of camp where you just go and just laugh at like, oh, look what they're wearing, look what they're saying. I think it does.
Yeah. But that's not one thing you're gonna like. You're not gonna recommend going to the cinema to watch.
No. That's what I mean. I'm not. There's like, as much as we can argue about whether this is a 2 or a 3 star movie, and I wouldn't try and argue you away from 2 because I totally understand it. If either of us said I would recommend this film, then we would have a disagreement. Because as much fun as I had watching it, I'm not telling anyone to watch fucking Hackers in 2024. Absolutely not. So that's been 1995 Hackers. What do you have for next week, sir?
This is going to be interesting when I give you the little quiz, because if I give you anything, if I give you the director, the actor, if I give you the tagline, you're going to get it straight away. I even think you're going to get it with the year.
Oh, Jesus Christ, you're putting pressure on me here. I'm totally going to shit. I know I'll fuck this up for sure, so don't even worry about that. It's like, you know what it's like with a quiz. As soon as you put me on the spot now, and if you ask me the question, name a movie, I'm not convinced I'd be able to answer it.
Name any movie in the world. Right, 1975.
1975.
I know we're going deep.
Jesus Christ!
I honestly thought you were the guy from the year.
75. 75.
Think
so it's
70 films that we need to do that we haven't done.
It's not. Well, it's not Jaws because that was later.
No. Boom, boom.
Is it Jaws?
It's Jaws, dude.
I honestly, for a second, I thought I had it. No, because Jaws was before Star Wars, and Star Wars was 77. I don't know why I thought it was like 76 or something like that, but that's so weird because I started watching Jaws recently, and I was like, "Fuck!"
Last night, so I was watching it last night. It was on Sky last night, and I'm thinking, I'm not too sure if I've seen Jaws. And then as I started watching a bit of it, I've seen Jaws. So I popped it on to record. So
it's what's interesting going back and watching this film. One, it's just like, well, this is a fantastic movie. But two, because it's a 70s film, and obviously, it created the summer blockbusters. I'm sure everyone listening to this is aware. It's just how much slower those movies are. Like they're willing to just kind of luxuriate in character and location and stuff. There's no rush to get you from A to B. Like this film takes its time.
And that what's good, like you said, summer blockbuster. This is what then gave you Star Wars and things like that. But
it all starts with this.
Yeah, what's really going to be interesting is just talking about it, because everyone knows the story of Jaws anyway, right? They know about Spielberg. They know about like the shark being famously shit. That's why you had to come up with a lot of things around it. It's going to be really good to talk about. I'm really looking forward to
like the cast is amazing. It's so quotable. And dead eyes, like a doll's eyes and all that. Like it's a wonderfully shot movie. It's a wonderfully acted movie, but it is also a very, very 70s movie. There's no escaping it. Aesthetically, the only thing I'll say is if you can get your hand on it, and I think this might be my excuse, is supposedly the 4K transfer of this film is supposedly absolutely phenomenal. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able, because I think it's available on Sky or one of those. It's definitely, I was watching it on something, whether it be fucking Netflix or whatever. But I did hear someone talking about it recently and said, like, if you can watch the 4K cut of this, it's almost transformative. I think I mentioned, we did Road Warriors a few months back, and I think you just watched the standard cut. And I honestly think it was like, we might as well have been watching different movies, because the 4K transfer of Road Warriors is, and I'm going to use that word again, is utterly transformative. Like, because it was always a bit rough around the edges, that film, and it still is, there's no escaping it. But the clarity of the picture is just miles ahead of even the Blu-ray or HD or whatever like that. It's completely different. And when I heard that about Jaws, I'm like, I might have to try this out. So this might be my excuse, if I can find it at least.
Part of me was thinking we should wait until next year to do this, because it's going to be 50 years old. But
fair enough. But then we can just kind of remind people, can't we? That'll be fine.
But we'll do his 49th anniversary. It's fine.
But we'll let's do things differently on this podcast.
But after watching it like a big of it last night, I was thinking, you know what? No, I want to watch all of this film. So
that's a great shout. Well, it was the same thing. I watched, like you said, I think about half an hour, 45 minutes of it, and I just stopped. I was like, dude, just watch this for the podcast. And for some reason, it just dropped out of my head. So I'm glad you brought it up. So no, that's an absolutely awesome choice. And we could probably do with a big hitter after a few more obscure choices.
Questionable ones. I mean, if Jaws isn't getting a 4 or a 5 or a 4.5 or something, there's a problem.
I'll be fucking amazed. Like if I go back and I'm like, dude, it turns out Jaws is shit. I don't think that's happening. But anyway, this has been this is a weird sense to say. This has been Hackers. Join us next week for Jaws. Different class of movie, dare I say. Yeah. But do you have anything else before we wrap this up?
No, mate, nothing from me today.
All right, cool. I've been Liam. He's been Rob, and you've been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.